recruiting.com.
Powers, who did you talk to this week?
We caught up with Guy Frazier, DCTF contributor, and you can follow some of his fine work at texasfootball.com/recruiting. And we're going to get his take on his parody account, which I'm looking forward to.
A lot to talk about with Guy Frazier here on Texas Football Today.
Greg Powers, TexasFootball.com, and we're joined by a special guest this week, man. One of our top guys, one of my good friends, Guy Frazier, man. It's been a good year. You want to know why? Texas high school football is back. The fans are back. It actually is starting to cool down. It feels like fall today. You know, as we're doing this interview on Tuesday night, which will be aired on Wednesday, it's going to be even more fall weather coming for us in the days ahead. And how excited are you just to be out there and going out and seeing some good action? You've been to some good games so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, things are starting to change as far as, weather-wise, when games are starting to kick off more nighttime or dusk, and get things rolling a little bit. So you got to change your camera settings and adjust a little bit. But, I made a fun trip out to Tyler last week with a couple of the guys. I got to see DJ Hicks, and it was the first time I wore a pullover because, weather's changing. And so you're starting to feel a little bit like fall. So we've hit the road, hit East Texas a little bit, hit some good games here locally. Saw Duncanville to Soto last week, which, big win for Reggie Samples, getting win number 300 and everything that came with that, but also saw some good recruits and a lot of college coaches in the building. So, that type of stuff is always fun to chat with those guys and get to know some of these players more, but also pick the brains of guys like Barrick Neely was on the sideline from UTEP. And just catch up with good friends and whatnot. So it's been good so far the first couple of weeks.
Man, I've seen you on social media. I even see that you have a parody account out there now.
I do.
What's that about?
Yeah, so obviously I've got a little bit of a distinct voice. That's a little bit of my trademark. And so that became a little bit of a joke really for a while now. But the first week, Step and Mike Roach and myself were all together. And next thing you know, this idea of making a parody account really centered around my voice, but more just, some of my mannerisms and whatnot. And, we've all got them, but I'm a pretty good sport and can laugh at myself a little bit. So Stephen Peters, who does a little bit of freelance coverage for Dallas Morning News and Vipe and some of those companies, had teamed up with Mike to make an account. And I kind of urged them to do so because I thought, it's pretty funny. And it's just kind of taken a life of its own. A couple of the Dave Campbell's people follow it. And, we're slowly trying to grow it. I think people think it's kind of interesting that I find it funny too. But, I think got to be a good sport. So.
Well, we all have our idiosyncrasies, I think, when we're out on the beat. Everybody has, I think, know how it is. We all get together covering Texas high school football, college football, recruiting. Everybody seems to have that one special thing about them that either makes them unique or funny or completely unfunny and too serious. Yeah. Everybody's got something going on, and they're all we all are able to pick on each other in those certain ways. And I don't think anybody gets offended by it or anything like that. It's all in good fun, and we all enjoy each other's company. We've talked about a lot of big time recruits, articles that you've done on the site, articles I've done on the site, following each other on Twitter and looking at all the top guys. But so many guys in the first few weeks, there's some names out there that I just feel like I kind of want to talk about. And one of those intriguing names to me is TJ Shanahan from down at Austin Westlake, a kid who moved in from Florida. When I watched his tape from Florida, I was super impressed. And I know that he hasn't really moved up the rankings list like on some of the national sites yet, but when I watched that tape, I thought, this is going to be one of the top rated guys in Texas, maybe a top 10 type of guy. I think those rankings will catch up. What were your impressions of him as he adjusted Texas high school football there at Austin Westlake? Is he that good, or am I a little bit too optimistic about him?
Yeah. So, small sample size for me. One thing that even made it even smaller was the night I saw him, it seemed like they were rotating him a little bit. So I don't know if that's as he just kind of grows and gels within the Westlake program, or, I couldn't tell if he got injured early in the game. Now, he did play majority of it. So I saw a good amount of snaps. obviously a really big physical kid. I didn't know this, but I guess he has a Polynesian background. Was actually related to a couple of the Euless Trinity. I think two players, or at least one. His cousins were at Euless Trinity, so he had a lot of family in the house that night. So I didn't get to talk to him after, but just getting eyes on him, and I've watched his huddle tape too. Obviously, a really physical player, and he just mauls guys up front. I don't know what you thought. It seemed like when he was in Florida, he was in more of a run-based offense.
Right.
So a lot of his film was of him and run protection and trying to get downfield and just maul dudes. A little bit different at Westlake, obviously. So I think he's trying to gel into that and get used to that. But they've got such a talented front line across the board. It's not just dependent on him, but I do think some of those rankings and stuff like that will probably catch up because his recruitment has really started to pick up and pick steam, obviously, in the last couple of weeks. And that's kind of when I went and saw him, was when he started to blow up on Twitter and with the Mike Roaches of the world and guys like that. So, I'm interested to see where his recruitment goes. And I'd like to see him again at some point this year, but obviously a really big physical kid and athletic for his size.
The fun time of the year for me, we get into the third and fourth weeks of the season. That's when the highlight tapes really start to be intriguing. Sure. I think this year's evaluation for the senior class is going to be more important. One thing that I find interesting covering recruiting over the years is that a lot of times you do early recruiting rankings and you don't necessarily have the time to go back and evaluate that senior crop as closely because you have to move on to covering the juniors and sophomores to get those rankings right. Sure. This is a year I feel like it's a little bit different. I have to really pay attention, and the guys who do rankings have to really pay close attention to the senior film, because we lost so much of the 2020 season, not only on the field, but off the field during the evaluation periods to see these guys compete against one another. So it's a fun time of the year just to kind of look at tapes. Right now, our number one rated guy in the state in the DCTF Hot 100 is Denver Harris. But unlike any other year, I don't know that there is a definitive number one guy. Of course, Quinn Ewers moved on to Ohio State, left high school a year early. But it's like a hot debate this year, I feel like. I feel like you can look down the list, and we've got Evan Stewart, number 6, and he's number 1 on some of the other sites. So, there's not a clearly defined guy out there. What are your thoughts in general? Let's just talk some ball, man. Like, what are your thoughts on some of the top guys out there? Do you have a guy who you feel like you would make an argument for number 1, or who is your pick? And I'll tell you why I got Denver Harris at number 1, even though he's nursing an ACL injury. He'll be coming back, hopefully later on this season. But it's rare that you have a defensive back with his size and his abilities playing for one of the top teams in the state. And those guys who can lock down the number 1 guy across from you on the offensive side of the football are extremely valuable no matter what the level is. You see it in the NFL, you see it in college football. And I put a certain value on that. It's easy, I think, sometimes to look at a quarterback or an edge rushing specialist and say, wow, this guy's a freak, but it's a little bit tougher to find a good corner and say he's got the footwork, the hips, the speed, and the size to be a number 1 guy. And I don't think we've had a whole lot of number 1 guys at the corner position. So I do think he's a unique talent, but I'm open to arguments this year.
Yeah, I think I was actually at the game. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he got injured in the Westlake semifinal game last year. So I was actually at that game. I had seen him years before when they came up to Dallas for the state championships and all that, and he started to become a name. I was really excited to get eyes on him that day, and then he got hurt. So, and I'm a little bit limited because, as you know, I'm a part-time guy and I help you out on the side here. So I don't get to get down to Houston as much, and I don't get to watch Huddle all the time. I obviously know plenty about Denver, and he's a special talent. I think you're right in that if you can have a guy like a corner, it's a little bit more unique for him to be, slated as your 1 guy. It's easy to just throw another quarterback up there, edge guy, like you said. That's a little more commonplace, but personally for me, and this maybe is a little biased because I'm closer to him, but I really like Evan Stewart, which I know is maybe, a little bit of the easy pick, but because I watch more Dallas-Fort Worth football, because it's in my backyard, the plays I've just seen Evan make both on the 7-on-7 circuit and pads, the weekly highlights you see, on Twitter. He's just a special talent. And for me, I've been watching this stuff for a long time, but I've really only been, covering it from a recruiting perspective for a couple years now. But, he's, to me, a generational type talent, the twitchiness, the athleticness that he can bring to the table. And I just think that the playmaking ability he has, yes, I mean, Denver has that too, but Evan to me is just really, really special. And I also think he's a really smart, like cerebral player. So there's just something there that he just catches my eye. And so I think that class, that's probably my pick. But again, that's a little biased because I get to see him more than I get to see a guy like Denver in person. I can talk to Evan if I want. I can't get a hold of Denver like that. So it's a little different, I'm not sure anybody can really get a hold of Denver at times. But, obviously a really special talent. He's just a little bit out of my scope just because he's not in my backyard as much. So.
Well, I mean, I think an argument could be made for a guy like Harold Perkins, right? Like, I think that if you're looking at a guy who brings certain intangibles to the table, speed, aggressiveness, and downhill ability, Harold Perkins is one of those guys who has a special skill set that is unique, and he really jumps out at you on tape. If he was a little bit heavier, I think he would even be at the top of even more boards. Everybody has him rated, in that 5-star-ish type of range. But I mean, you can just look down the list, and a guy who has caught my eye certainly jumped out of the gates with a strong freshman season, sophomore season, junior year, and has been playing really good so far this season, in my opinion, is Cam Dewberry. He's number 13 in the DCTF Hot 100 right now. And he just seems to me like a player on the rise in some respects. They had that big win over Allen, and he just passes the eyeball test. So I think that there's some arguments out there. It's like we talked about. It's just a unique year, and I think that we could reflect back on these rankings over time and say it'll be fun to say this is the ones we got right and this is the ones we got wrong. And I think there will be a wider variance with this class.
And Cam's a guy I would like to get eyes on in person at some point. I never think it's fair for at least me to make a judgment until I see someone in person. I just think that adds a different perspective to it. So I know Atascocita has been up here twice, and I was not at either game. But that's a guy in the playoffs. I know it'll be later in his cycle will be wrapping up by that point. But I would like just to see him in person. I've heard all sorts of ideas of what he could be at the next level, and it sounds like Oklahoma's OV form this past week was really impressive on his part. So I'm a Texas guy. I would like to see him in Austin maybe eventually, but I don't know if that ends up happening. But obviously a really special talent, and just because you mentioned him, that is a guy I'd like to see in person myself.
It's really interesting too because he is one of those guys who could slide inside out. I think early on in his college career, like Kenyon Green, who played at Texas A&M, he's a guy who starts on the inside, but as he grows and develops and matures in a college program, that he could end up popping out and playing some tackle as he gains experience. We'll see how it all works out. The 2022 class, just as intriguing to me. I've got 3 guys at the top of my board right now. I've made no bones about who those 3 guys are. And it's DJ Hicks, Anthony Hill, and Jalen Hale. Those are the 3 guys who I've pegged early. And there's certainly some sleepers who are starting to emerge. And these guys, by and large, have all the major offers. So sometimes it's not fair whenever every college in the entire country is calling your name and extending you scholarship offers. Those guys kind of rise to the top sometimes. Is there anybody else out there besides those 3 that you've seen that you were like, wow, man, we should take note of this guy?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Those are 3 really impressive names to throw out there on the top. And Anthony to me has really grown into a favorite. He's probably the most sure tackler I've ever seen, at least covering from the recruiting perspective. And I was trying to think of just all the guys I've seen over the years chasing this stuff with my dad growing up and all that. I don't know. He's tough to top. So other names in that class that stick out, I'm just trying to think of impressive guys I've seen in the 23 class that I've seen this year.
What about the black unicorn, Reuben Owens, man? He's certainly a guy who grabs a lot of headlines.
Yeah, so Ruben's a guy I'd love to see in person, but obviously really blowing up right now. And he's actually a guy that good friend Mike West, who's a guy down in Houston, uh, put all of us on when he was a freshman or maybe an eighth grader. And obviously the nickname stood out a lot. But, he's in a run heavy offense down there at El Campo. So he's got plenty of opportunities to shine. And in the last couple of weeks, has put up some really gaudy numbers. And obviously another guy that just really curious to see how his recruitment, winds up. I think he could end up in Austin, but it sounds like Georgia was impressive to him, and he's got a really good relationship with Arch Manning. So there's a couple guys. It's Ruben, Jonte Cook's another guy, and then Arch, who's not in Texas, but that whole recruitment, seeing where those guys end up, it seems like they end up maybe together. But it's fun just to watch those guys' recruitment at the top and kind of see where they end up. But Jonte would actually be another guy that I like a lot.
We're going to wrap this up. You were at the big Duncanville DeSoto game. I got a chance to see DeSoto earlier. You mentioned Jonte Cook, and we all know about the great Duncanville seniors on that team. They've got a loaded class this year, a couple of big-time offensive linemen in Cam Williams and Jalen Early. They got Amari Abor on the defensive side of the football. But a couple of young guys jumped out to you. Who were those guys, and who should these fans that are listening to this podcast take note of, because they're going to be these next big-time dudes?
Yeah, so one of them actually got a big offer from Texas today in Collin Simmons. I'm a little behind on some of this stuff with some of the younger guys because I had some health issues in the offseason, so I'm slowly kind of catching up with that the last couple of weeks.
You don't give yourself enough credit, man. You're out there seeing top guys all the time.
Right. So, Collin popped up because he gave me a follow on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. So I'm like, okay, Duncanville, who is this guy? Talked to our good buddy Mike Roach, and he's like, he's a dude, go watch his huddle. And so it's, I think it's all JV film at this point a couple of weeks ago because he had no real varsity experience yet. At any other school, that kid's probably starting on varsity last year. His JV film was violent, as sure of a tackler as you'll see at that level. I mean, he's just totally dominating, super twitchy off the edge. So I'm like, I wonder how that's going to, progress onto the varsity level. Well, last Friday was, Amari Abor was out. So it was kind of his stage to really take off and be the guy. And he did just that. He's a dude. He probably had the most impressive night, and that's saying something with the amount of guys that were on the field. Forced, I think he forced 2 fumbles, I believe, recovered 1.
Wow.
Had a sack or 2, deflected the pass, just super active up front and disruptive. And so he picked up the Texas offer today. Texas coaches were in the building on Friday, so they obviously took notice of him. So he's probably the next big guy up front in the front 7 for Duncanville, which is saying something because that's a front 7 that's produced a lot over the last couple of years. And then another name that stood out, and it's actually a name I've known since he was in middle school, is DeCorian Moore, who's a receiver, athlete over at Duncanville. He's already getting his fair share of snaps at the varsity level as a freshman. And actually made a couple plays or 2 downfield and showed flashes of what his potential could be. He's actually even a little bit of a threat on special teams already at this point. So, he's just a guy that is ahead of his age. And I've seen a couple of guys like that this year. And to me, that's fun, is when you find those younger guys who are kind of the guys are going to bloom into something down the road, hopefully. So those are 2 names that I think will take off eventually. And people should know if they don't know who they are at this point.
That's why we go to the games, right? Those are the guys that we're hoping to discover whenever we go out there, the fun guys that you're able to, even if you're not discovering them, you're the first one to see them, that you're able to see them early on in their progression and see them develop as they, go throughout their high school career. It's a lot of fun to then, in turn, watch them play on a college football field. And you can think of way back when you saw them playing as a 14-year-old freshman and say, that dude was 6'5", when he was a freshman. Now look at him playing on the big stage, and it's a whole lot of fun. Well, guys, thanks for joining us this week. It was a blast having you on. We're going to do this more often.
Sure.
One of the best follows on Twitter, at Uncle Fraz, Phrase. I don't know how you say it. Follow him.
Yeah.
Uncle Fraz on Twitter, and then you can follow some of his fine work right here at DCTF. TexasFootball.com/recruiting. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, hey Greg, thanks for always giving me the opportunity and the platform, and just always giving me a shot. I really appreciate it.
Man, you deserve it.
Thanks,
There he
appreciate
is,
it.
the real Guy Frazier, joining us here on Texas Football Today. Our good buddy,
Man of the people.
a man of the people. I haven't seen him in a minute.
I think you'll see him tomorrow.
Is he going to be in Longview? Or I'm sorry, in Mesquite?
Yep,
Awesome.
according to Shep.
Hi, Guy. We'll see you tomorrow, I guess. So there he is. Appreciate his insights and appreciate his help covering recruiting for Dave Campbell's Texas Football at texasfootball.com/recruiting.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you would like more and to be notified when they come out, go ahead and click that subscribe button right down there. You can also watch Texas Football Today every day live at noon on texasfootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, and right here on YouTube. For more of the best coverage of Texas football in the Lone Star State, go to texasfootball.com/subscribe.